presidential, National Assembly, governorship, state houses of assembly. What did you make of the whole process? We've done it again, another time. Probably the 7th time for those who are counting from 1999. What did you make of this one?
Well, not exactly the most edifying exercise that we've been through. I've been away, of course, quite a lot, and deliberately, since I was going to be physically away, I preferred not to make comments. But that didn't mean I didn't receive from time to time reports and from what was happening here. And it was not altogether unanticipated for one simple reason. The nation was moving towards a situation not planned, just one of these things which happened fortuitously, where the mold, the existing mold, was going to be broken. And the signs were there that there would be die-hard opposition to the breaking of that mold. In fact, my apprehensions were on such a level that Emeka Anyoko, the former Secretary General of Commonwealth, and I, with whom I interact quite a lot, decided at a last meeting before I traveled out that we should prepare a statement, a formal statement, appealing to the politicians not to let this mere electoral process be the commencement of a total unhealable rupture among the politicians. And I think before I was supposed to send him a draft, which we then both look at. Something happened anyway, I had to dash out immediately, and that was that. But, elections should be keenly contested. But I still believe very much in what I call the Fashola dictum. You may remember at one time he said that elections should be like festivals. There should be yet another aspect of the festive spirit of humanity. And this was anything but festive. What was most distressing, in fact, so distressing that I felt I should reach out here from my base in Abu Dhabi at New York University. I should reach out and try and make a statement. Unfortunately, the technology didn't work because I was going to make an appeal from Abu Dhabi. And also just put in an oar into the troubled waters. But again, there's technology.
Made that difficult, if not next to impossible.
Yes, but thank you. So, but on arriving, of course, I checked. I came in for the World Poetry Day, and immediately, of course, I was bombarded by the most horrendous tales, narratives, both pre and after election. Since then, I've also read columns. I've seen Nigerian papers for the first time in months, and I didn't like what I read at all. It's like trust has broken down completely, and even the restraints, the minimal restraints that we've learned to expect from seasoned politicians have been jettisoned completely. And then my mind also went to, because we're now moving into certain aspects of what I have observed and also interrogated. I had to go back in the archives to meetings which had been held before, 3 to my special recollection, one in Enugu, one in which was organized by doctors, a doctors' medical association in the United States, South United States, where I lectured. Right. And the third one at the Mousson in Lagos on the theme Hands Across the Niger. And the last one, I think, was Hands Across the Nation, and I delivered lectures there. And with those civilized encounters, with the give and take, the very calm analysis of our history, the prospects, etc., I just couldn't help wondering how things deteriorated so fast, unraveled so fast. The promise of all those meetings, the inter-ethnic understanding, and a very calm and calculated clinical approach to history, and I said the prospect. So it hasn't been a very pleasant homecoming for me, personally.
Now, many people hearing you say this would be surprised because this would be possibly your first comments on these elections. But if what we read online were to be believed, you had made several comments in the recent past concerning these elections. And so when people try to square that with what you're saying now, they get confused. Did you, in fact, make those comments? For example, did you say that regardless of who is in Aso Rock, the North would be ruling Nigeria, would be in charge of Nigeria, so you're not really bothered about who's in Aso Rock because that would always be the case?
I was horrified when the statements were sent to me. I can tell you, I'm repeating, I have not made a comment, deliberately stayed away from making a comment. Since the electoral pistol was fired, I have not said anything in public. In private, of course, I've discussed things, but I've never made a statement. And we've denounced these, both myself and those who look after my affairs, we've denounced this fake news over and over again. And all I have to say now, and we've been closing down certain portals which we were able to, fake platforms attributed to me with my photograph. The whole process has been so sickening. And I'd hope that while I was away, being away physically would even lessen the orgy of falsification. On the contrary, it seemed to have worked the opposite way. It was like, oh, he's away, he won't see it in time, and we would have done the damage we want to do anyway. And it's and what sickens me even more than those who actually write it is the way it is circulated among ordinary intelligent people who do not throw away this garbage or come out. As occasionally somebody like Shola Adeyeye, for instance, I remember when he, even without contacting me, and said robustly, Wole Soyinka could never have said such a thing. And this for me is the kind of posture which intelligent Nigerians should learn to adopt by now. If it was possible for somebody to fake a platform named after the new Nobel laureate and use that platform to announce my obituary, yet another obituary, another death, saying I dropped dead. I use the expression, creating distress, among people. I enjoy it when I read it.
Yeah, you took
but
it
I
last
stopped.
time, each time
I don't enjoy it anymore because I know it is causing distress, emotional distress to a number of people. And on the other hand, it is creating an atmosphere which is extremely dangerous for this nation. When things are attributed to me on that level, in which I'm supposed to be speaking sweepingly about ethnic groups, about religious groups, and so on, for me, this is a conspiracy towards chaos. Because people will take it, some people, those who take it seriously and will say, I see. Well, this is where he is now. Well, we had better now go our own way. It's very dangerous. And I really wish, in fact, I was telling of one young semi-protege of mine. He was asking me why I hadn't commented on what's going on. I said, please, just get away. Where have you commented on all the rubbish being attributed, been stuffed in my mouth in my absence? You're a columnist, you're on a newspaper, you have your platform. Have you actually come out aggressively to attack this phenomenon, this evil of fake news, fake attribution? Not a word have I spoken until this moment publicly on this election in any aspect. So what does one do with that?
But do you think, Prof, it's our own understanding of the nature of democracy? Because a number of people I've spoken to, of course, very few of them have the kind of experience, the kind of knowledge and background that you have, say that partly our problem, if you want to call it that, or our challenge when we come to this election cycle is that for many in our own society, democracy is about elections, whereas elections are only a part of democracy.
That's right.
The other equally important, possibly even more important parts of democracy than the actual election. Do you agree, or do you think that it is correct to say that we do not understand democracy as a people, and therefore that is affecting, all these outcomes, especially when we go through this exercise every 4 years or so?
Well, I don't think it's that we do not understand democracy. It's that certain stakes have been catapulted to the fore and have come to overwhelm what should be the real stuffing of the democratic process. I'll give you an example. In fact, one of the reasons why I refuse to endorse any candidate or be seen, forget what people put in my mouth, is that, as far as I was concerned, none of the candidates for me actually addressed things which were closest to my heart. Like, again, reconstructing the nation. Yeah, there were token statements here and there that I read, but I didn't really see any genuine commitment, any believable agenda about quote-unquote restructuring, decentralization, which is at the heart for me of Nigeria's problem at the moment. People were more concerned, in my view, with just aiming for power. Now, it's not all about reconstruction. There's also the redressing of history. Let me explain what I mean by that. I mean the things which Mecca and I used to discuss and even work towards. For instance, we believe that to close this circle of negativities that we have embarked upon just before and including the Civil War, I happen to believe, for instance, that the presidency, as soon as possible, should go towards the eastern region, which lost a war. That this is one of the ways to heal the wounds of the nature. Now, that is a principle, a philosophy. And towards that end, for instance, I can reveal to you, when I formed a party at one time, the Democratic Front for the People's Federation, right, which Obasanjo at the time refused to register. I mention him because he was the one dictating to INEC, so don't tell me I should say INEC. Let me anticipate that. And then we teamed up with the African Renaissance Party, which was registered. A small party who had an office along the Badagry Road, but at least they were registered. And our candidate at the time was Patutome. Many people don't remember that. Didn't work out. Doesn't matter. These things don't happen suddenly. It's a progression. The following election, Emeka Anyaoku, for instance, phoned me one morning and said, "Have you heard about this young man called Kingsley Moghalu?" And I said, "Do you think he's the kind of person we're looking for?" He said, "I think so." So we met, and we decided we're going to back Kingsley Moghalu. Later on, for reasons best, which I didn't even bother to probe very much, Anyaoku sort of withdrew a little bit. I was left holding the baby. I didn't mind. I enjoyed it. I believed in it, absolutely. But what did I get? What did I get in response from quarters which I thought would understand what we were trying to do? They came at me and said I was splitting the votes of the Igbo. And, when I encounter situations like that, I come close to saying, do these people understand the complexities of democracy? That democracy is actually linked up, with issues beyond the immediate. It's linked up also with history. How did we get here? Is this where we want to be? How do we get out of it? What are the various prospects? And you strengthen democracy by using democratic means of making changes to arrive at your vision of society. which is what I've always done, what I've always believed in. And when I encounter a situation where the ethnic issue, which is permanently there,
or for a lot during this election.
Oh, yes. Or the religious issue becomes paramount, rather than a holistic look at history and a commitment to change within society, then I come close to really thinking with you that maybe what you just said was right, that maybe our people have not really, penetrated through to the intricacies of democracy, to the principles, to the imperatives in a total comprehensive manner, so that they only pick at one time, or one thing, one strand at a time. They worry that strand to death, and in the process, they strangle one another, where possible, with the strands, those bits and pieces that they've taken out of a totality. And of course, there are opportunists
who also manipulate the space.
They understand what democracy is about, but they also know how to manipulate the processes of democracy, how to twist the urgencies, the imperatives of the democratic ethos. They know how to twist it. They know how to play on raw emotions, on primitive instincts. They know how to just set one side against another simply to arrive at their goal, which is power. Unstinted power, selfish, alienating power, just power. That's what they're after.
Now, Prof, you earlier said that even though it was disappointing, you were sad to learn about quite a number of the things that were reported to have happened, but that they weren't really surprising because there had been a build-up even before you traveled. And that then led me to think, perhaps, what was this build-up? Because for many people, it came as a shock, some kind of surprise. They were bewildered largely, and maybe with the benefit of hindsight, to some extent naive about the workings of our own society. Many people assumed that we had overcome quite a number of the religious differences because there was so much intermarriage and all of that across ethnic groups and so on, that, look, quite a number of these things we had put behind us, only for them to resurface with a vengeance in this election cycle. Is that perhaps what you meant by, what exactly did you mean?
Yeah. All right. So there are building blocks towards the democratic edifice, always. And what we're witnessing is that as those building blocks, and by that I mean meetings like Hands Across the Niger, Hands Across the Nation, private meetings, group meetings, always with a focus in mind where you want to go eventually. Like, what kind of system do you want? What kind of ideology should bind all of you together? And which political party best promotes that ideology? All those building blocks have been knocked away, so that there was no difference left between, for instance, the two major parties. Movements of individuals across had totally vitiated identity, ideological identity. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Now, another building block, when we told the youth, listen, you have enormous voting power. Why don't you meet among yourselves? Give us a consensus candidate. I met literally all the young people. I'm talking about the last election,
Yes. Not this circle.
Not this one, no.
Right.
The last one, I met all the young people. I addressed them at a place not far from Alausa collectively, addressed them individually in twos and threes. I told those, I won't mention, they said, look, don't waste your time. There's no way I will back somebody like you, And I remember one of them complaining, I wasn't looking for a godfather, as if I offered to be his godfather. I already have enough godsons. But anyway, these meetings went on. So this is a part of the building blocks. And when they failed, for instance, I remember once we invited Obi Okwesili to try and negotiate among themselves. Then she ended up becoming a candidate, remember?
Herself.
So it was all very complicated, But one by one, those building blocks were being knocked away by seasoned politicians because they saw what was happening. They saw the possibility of a change. And they're politicians. Your life is politics. You're not going to sit down. I mean, people, as somebody once said, you don't sit down and wait for democracy to fall in your lap. You have to work for it. You have to fight for it, You have to negotiate for it. But don't sacrifice your principles. And so we have those other blocks. In other words, this election actually is a consequence. I mean, what happened at these elections, the emergence, for instance, of quote-unquote a third force. You see, it didn't happen overnight. It's a build-up on all those blocks I have already cited. And so the moment came when it seemed as if we had reached a mass moment. Unfortunately, a bit of fascism, from our observation, and this is one of the reasons why I was happy I was away at the time. A lot of fascism was creeping in. People saw what was supposed to happen, what we expected to happen, to be a divine command, to be inevitable, and to be right there and then, and began to act fascistically to other people. If you disagree with them on strategy, on even little issues of tactics, because they kept communicating with me that we don't like what we're seeing, what's developing here. So once again, the building blocks were not even just by the old brigade, but even by the youth. Oh, I forgot to mention SARS. SARS was another build-up. NSARS was another build-up. Significant momentum in the mobilization of alternative force within the nation. So there was alarm. One, by the old brigade, and as I said, there was a creeping fascism within the ranks by the new brigade. I watched a program, and when I watched this person speaking on air, I said, I understand, I can see what I was hearing now about. I could see how this new force was beginning to lose momentum, was beginning to lose even support because of a fascistic tendency among the followers. But I watched that program. Go and watch all the programs yesterday. You see that I don't want to mention names or anything of the sort, but you will know the one I'm talking about. That how could a Democrat, a self-described Democrat, aspiring to power by democratic means, speak like that, in that inciting way, in that denigration of all the structures which are supposed in the end to come to the aid of an election. Those structures will not guarantee they will not decide the result, but they at least will guarantee a reasonable, sustainable edifice of the democratic process. And I listened to that man talking, and I said, oh God, Nigeria is in trouble.